You're listening to Seattle Real Estate Podcast.
Hey everybody, I'm Sean Reynolds, the owner of Summer Properties Northwest and Reynolds Client Appraisal, and your host for this episode of the Seattle Real Estate Podcast. So today is Tuesday, March 31st, end of month. We've been in the shutdown for a couple of weeks now, some businesses longer than others. And so it's end of month. That means rent and bills are due. And that's what I'm going to kind of take a look at in this podcast is how are people going to get through this time period? How long is it going to go for? What are the implications if you skip a mortgage payment, if you skip a rent payment, and kind of what I'm seeing going on right now in the real estate market as far as a possible liquidity crisis coming up. So let's jump on into it. So the thing that I've been working on this morning is we've had a number of deals on transactions on the Summit Properties Northwest side either get extended out. We've had a fair number of those, maybe deals that got put together right as the crisis kind of emerged, early March-ish, early to mid-March. And we've had extensions on those, and I think people are kind of in that wait-and-see period of what's going on before they want to fully commit, because they don't know if they're going to have a job. They don't know if they're taking money out of the stock market. Stock market just took a massive dive when this thing all started. So how do those things play out? So a lot of transactions have been extended out, and they keep getting extended out. Frustrating for everybody, but totally reasonable considering all the things that have happened. Another thing that's happened is that we are, and that's what I've been dealing with this morning, is we are running into borrowers being denied mortgages. So the main thing in a real estate transaction that you get out of if you can't get a loan is you've got a financing contingency. And that states that if the borrower can't get a loan, they can get out of the transaction and get their good faith earnest money deposit back. Well, we've had a number of those over the last 2 days, and I want to read not a denial letter, but a reason from the mortgage lender, from the mortgage broker as to why the borrower was denied a mortgage. And this is going to have massive implications in the residential lending world in general, because as we come up on the beginning of April, which is tomorrow, a lot of people are going to be forced to either buy food or make that mortgage payment or make that rent payment. So lenders are going to be in the squeeze of putting out money for new loans and not getting money in on the old loans that they are already servicing. So, and I know servicing and origination are two wildly different things in the mortgage world, but it's all going to impact the ability and desire for mortgage companies to want to continue lending under these circumstances. So here's the email. This is from the loan officer to the real estate brokers involved that basically explains the denial. Sorry to be the bearer of bad news. Borrower got declined for the file today. The reason being is that per new directions from the agencies, Fannie Mae, FHA, and VA, the borrower's income has to be confirmed as stable and predictable going forward. And unfortunately, with the situation we're all in for the past month, the income of the borrower has declined, which throws off the debt-to-income numbers outside of the range, and the borrower is unable to get financing. For this specific borrower, switching a program from one to another wouldn't have any positive effect to get the loan back into approvable status. So what this is basically stating is that the lender is saying, hey, you, Mr. or Mrs. Borrower, don't have a stable income moving forward. And who does in this economy? Most people are out of work. Who has a job that is working consistently and has a stable outlook? Well, is your job going to be there in a month from now? We understand you're working from home, but what's that look like a month from now? Is your business stable? And you can't really show anything to prove that, yeah, my business is stable, because so many of these businesses, they operate one way or the other, and they don't necessarily have the financial documents to say, yeah, we're going to be good for another year. Nobody knows in this environment what's going to happen. So this is kind of the second instance of a denial that I have known of in the last couple of days. Is it a trend? I don't know. But the market conditions out there with so many people being out of work, and I've got a second kind of article that I'm going to work on here. But according to city officials, and this is from the city of Seattle, nearly 50% of Seattle area renters are rent burdened, which means they are experiencing a loss of income and accumulating significant amounts of personal debt due to the COVID-19 pandemic. And that's only going to get worse. And so this is the beginning of April. Tomorrow's the beginning of April. If we go into May, that's going to be a second cycle of rent payments and mortgage payments that are in play. I think we've got potential here for a severe liquidity crisis. And what that means is that even though buyers want to buy and sellers want to sell, you may have mortgage lenders who don't want to lend under these circumstances. And you can't really blame them because they're a business like anybody else. They're trying to keep afloat. And are they going to be able to make that happen without income coming in to cover their existing obligations? Don't know. Is the mortgage, is that portion of business, are they going to get bailed out with the second stimulus package? I don't know. But as we kind of move in further with time, I think there's going to be a real set of eyeballs on the mortgage lending industry in general because rent and mortgages, landlords, tenants, all of that is intertwined. And if people don't have money to do it, they're going to stop making payments. And guess what? It's going to have not a trickle down, but it's going to have a rush down effect on how we do business. So from my perspective on the Reynolds and Klein side, as an owner of an appraisal company, we're still super busy. And appraisers are considered essential, so they are out there scurrying around, trying not to get the virus, trying not to spread the virus, but still doing appraisals for Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac loans that are happening. Those are still going gangbusters. We've still got buyers who want to buy. We've got properties coming on the market. I worked on a couple of listings with my brokers yesterday on the Summit side, which is residential real estate sales. We've got properties coming onto the market. So there is activity in spite of everything that's going on. It's not like things are shut down. Brokers found out last weekend that they were considered essential services. Residential real estate brokers, commercial brokers are not. They are still, you're shut down, work from home, that kind of thing. But residential brokers can go out and show homes. You can only show the home with one other person, so one broker, one buyer, or one seller at a time in a home, and you have to keep your distancing, basically follow the guidelines of the CDC. So some real restrictions on how we do residential home selling business, but we're able to operate at a very minimum. So what's going to happen is that you're going to have buyers and sellers who are willing to enter into a transaction, and then you're going to get a couple of months down the road, maybe a month down the road, we're going to find out that I think a lot of these transactions are going to get canceled, basically because the lenders are not wanting to lend in this environment. And especially if a whole bunch of people default on their mortgages and default on their rent payments, it's going to be a liquidity crisis one way or the other, whether it's big or small. So those are some of the things that I'm kind of seeing as just an inevitable march of kind of time towards these facts. Another thing is the recession. I have people keep asking me, are we going to hit a recession? I don't think there's any way to avoid a recession at this point, and that is 2 back-to-back quarters of declining gross domestic product. I think that'll happen for sure. But the thing with this recession is that it was so quick, it was so hard because everybody got put out of work. It's not like the economy is struggling. At least it wasn't in February when we kind of started this whole thing. It was still going along pretty well. But with the virus, we've been shut down. So how will mortgage lenders deal with this? I'm not sure. Will liquidity become an issue? That's kind of my prediction as of right now. You might have great demand and you might have great, less supply, which is still keeping prices up, especially here in the Seattle market and in markets that are close into employment centers. You're still seeing that across the board. There's still more buyers than there are properties on the market. And I think so many sellers have held off bringing their properties to market because they don't want people that are possibly infected coming through their home and getting them infected as a result. Vacant homes, those get a lot of emphasis right now because you can go into one if you don't touch a lot of the surfaces. You're not, your risk of getting infected is probably way less than the grocery store. And appraisers are putting a premium on vacant homes as well. Okay, that one's vacant. I don't have to risk my life for the appraisal fee to go into that home, and I can get this inspection done, and I can get this appraisal out, and I can get paid. So those are some of the things that I think people are working through right now. So the Seattle City Council has unanimously passed a resolution calling on Governor Jay Inslee, federal legislators, and the White House administration to place a moratorium on rent and mortgage payments for homes and businesses. I think we all probably could have seen this one coming from the Seattle City Council. They are known for doing some, at times, really unpopular things, especially as far as landlords go. A lot of landlords are really questioning having rental property in Seattle because the restrictions are so hard. If you own a home and you have tenants in that property, a lot of times you do not have the rights of most other landlords. That's a super nice and easy way to put it, but it is way favorable towards the tenants in Seattle than it is, and I'm talking Seattle proper, within the Seattle limits. So the Seattle City Council unanimously passed a resolution saying, hey, give everybody a break. That is great and all in theory, but how are you going to do that? How are you going to do that with big national lenders? Is this going to, this isn't going to go through anytime soon. And I haven't heard anything on, hey, you don't have to pay your rent. But guaranteed, this is going to draw headlines and people are going to go, I thought we didn't have to pay rent. I heard something. We didn't have to pay rent. That is not the case. This is not enacted. So make those rent payments, make those mortgage payments. You signed up for it, virus or not, got to make those payments. And that might be a really unpleasant thing for people to think about, but you are impacting your own credit if you do that. If you don't have a written agreement with either your lender or your landlord, specifically breaking out exactly what you're doing on either your mortgage or your rent, then don't just not make your payment. If you can't make your payment, let people know, hey, here's my scenario, here's my situation. It's just like in the financial and housing crisis of 2008. You got to let people know what you're doing so everybody can kind of react and make accommodations accordingly. A lot of what I hear about is mortgage forbearance, meaning that you don't have to pay it today, but it's going to get tacked on to the end of your, say you've got a 30-year mortgage, it gets tacked on an extra couple of months, whatever you missed, and they're going to hit you up with interest for that. So it is basically, you don't pay today, but you will pay later, and you'll probably pay a ton more. And it may also impact your credit. So if you skip a rent or a mortgage payment, be aware, and I've talked about this before, that may impact your credit. And it may make it difficult for you to not get an apartment, get a rental home down the road, or more importantly, not be able to purchase a home. So before you make those decisions, do some research. Don't just take your best friend's advice that, hey, I heard Seattle had something where we don't have to pay our rent. Woo-hoo. Don't do that. Some of the quotes from the Seattle City Council article are, and this is from the council member Tammy Moore, who wrote this up, is, I hate to say it, but we're in for several months or longer of people being in crisis. I think it's a lot longer than several months because people are without income. That's going to hit people up pretty hard, and it's going to be for a while. We need to make sure that our mom and pop business owners, our neighbors down the street, your sister who just got laid off, are also getting the relief they need to weather this crisis. So just last week, we were talking about the stimulus package kind of taking care of everybody. But I think people are realizing, all right, a $1,200 check isn't really going to go far in this market. My rent is way more than that. My mortgage is way more than that. Maybe you're a married couple with kids. You get $2,400 and then $500 per kid. But maybe you make more than 75 grand or 100 grand, kind of the thresholds, and you're not going to get much, and you have no income and not much in the way of savings. That is what's going on out there right now, and people are faced with some really tough decisions. What do I do? What bills am I going to pay that month? That's where we're going to head into, and we're heading into right now. So people are aware, I think, that even though we've got the stimulus money coming, that's not really going to do it. It's not going to save all, take care of all the problems. It's just a small drop in the bucket compared to most people who have significant rent and mortgage payments, especially here in the Seattle area where housing is super expensive. I saw a page on Facebook. It was the Seattle rent strike. And that was after seeing an international movement of people calling for financial aid after losing their ability to earn income. Seattle rent strike. So you are a tenant and you are going to go on a rent strike. You are not going to pay your rent. That sounds great in theory, but everybody is kind of connected. And if you don't pay your rent, that will trickle down to you and that will hit you hard. So pay your rent if you can. If you can't, let your landlord know, here's my scenario. This is what I'm looking at. What can we work out? And I think anybody like the mortgage companies and the banks in the '08 crisis, were they willing to work with you? Yeah, they weren't excited to, and it might take some effort to figure out a plan. But everybody's got to figure out their own plan because it will impact them individually. It's not like we can just collectively stop paying rent, stop paying mortgages, and this is going to go away. It's not. Those are going to be dings in your credit for a long time. So the Seattle resolution calls for a rent freeze, so all rent due is forgiven. It calls for that same kind of relief with mortgage payments. I don't think that you are going to see this. This is not going to pass. We're not going to have that. I'd be really surprised because in order to get that kind of legislation together, especially on the national basis where Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac say, yep, no mortgages are due this month, we'll tack it on at the end. That's a huge project, and I don't see that happening. And the reason I say that is from the appraisal end of things, all of our orders are still coming in full appraisal, meaning you are not allowed to do an exterior-only inspection. You are not allowed to do a desktop appraisal where you sit at your desk and do the evaluation. You still have to go out, and it is preferred, unless there's really major extenuating circumstances, even with operating an appraisal company in a state like Washington, where the appraisers are considered essential and there is a stay home, stay safe, we're still being asked to go into people's homes all day long to get these appraisals done. And that's because the national companies, the national secondary mortgage market, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, are basically saying, yeah, we can't take the risk. We need a full appraisal. We know that people are infected and dying in your state, but we want you to do it anyway. If you have a problem with that, let us know. And so that's kind of where we're at. So you take that kind of stance from the appraisal end of things, extrapolate that to the mortgage market, I don't think you're going to see a big change up in the next month or two. That would take a long time to kind of get that enacted. And I think we'll be back in business. People will be back up and running business-wise before that could get put into place. But in the meantime, the damage is being done to the economy from this shutdown. So those are kind of some of the major items that I am looking at. Mainly just the sellers want to buy and the buyers, or the sellers want to sell. The sellers don't want to buy. The sellers want to sell and the buyers want to buy. But bottom line is will they each be able to do that? That is something that I'm kind of looking at from a liquidity crisis pretty hard, because I think you're going to see, I think we're right on the very beginning of seeing a lot of lenders saying, these are some really uncertain times. We are not comfortable with lending people money under these circumstances. And I don't think we've got enough time between now and next month, which will be May 1, when a second set of rent and mortgage payments are due. I don't think you're going to see anything enacted between now and then. I could be wrong. I've been wrong before. I made some predictions that we'd be back to business as usual by April 6th and April 13th. That is clearly not going to happen. Don't know how much further past the April 13th things are going to go, but I think you're going to see the stay-at-home stay in place through the end of April. And, on a national level, the president has basically said, hey, I would have loved to have had a beautiful Easter, I think is the term that he had. But in talking with his officials, it's pretty clear that we need to rope this thing down for probably through April. Do certain areas of the country get relief earlier than others? I think so. I think Seattle will go back to business before New York does, just because their outbreak has been so much different because of the density of their areas. And maybe if we get some, statistics back that say, hey, this is on the downward decline, we might still need to keep the stay home, stay safe order in place, because that is essentially what is preventing the virus from spreading even further. So those are some of the things that I am thinking about. Will we have a liquidity crisis? I think we certainly could. Are you going to start hearing more and more about that? Yeah, I think you will. But you can say, hey, I heard this. What was that podcast? Who was that guy? Well, I'm Sean Reynolds, the owner of Summit Properties Northwest, Reynolds & Klein Appraisal, and your host for this episode of the Seattle Real Estate Podcast. We're shooting daily throughout the coronavirus pandemic outbreak and through its resolution. So thank you so much for watching on YouTube if you're watching. Thank you so much for listening if you're listening on one of our many platforms for podcasting. Appreciate it so much. Stay tuned. We'll be here tomorrow. Thanks again. Bye. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you'll know when our next video is out.